Hello and welcome to the pre-application webinar for the Light-Duty Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program that is funded by the VW Mitigation Trust. I'm Minda Berbecco, and I will be leading you through this presentation today. I'm joined by my colleagues Linda Huey, Ken Mack, and Itzel Guzman from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, who is serving as the administrator of this statewide program on behalf of the California Air Resources Board. This is the first of two pre-application webinars, and the solicitation is now open and will close on July 15th at 5 p.m. We understand that this webinar is oversubscribed, so if you do have colleagues who have trouble getting in, there will be another webinar. This recording of this webinar will be up on our website, and there are ample other opportunities to have your questions answered by our team. If you have any other questions, we'll have an opportunity to address that during the webinar as well. Before we start our presentation, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. We'll be recording the webinar and it will be posted later to the program website. Please mute yourself. There are two ways to ask questions at the end of the webinar. You can either use the chat tool and you can write a question to the person labeled Ask Questions here in the chat, or you can raise your hand and ask the question during the webinar. After the webinar. You are welcome to chat your questions to the host throughout the webinar, though keep in mind your question may be answered during the webinar. Please wait to raise your hand until the end of the webinar, and if you hear your question answered, please do not ask it again. We'll go over this in more detail after the presentation. We'll begin today with background information on the Light-Duty Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. Then we'll go over some key information, which includes eligibility and requirements, funding information, application requirements, evaluation criteria. Then we'll move on to the timeline, which includes both implementation and operational requirements. And we'll talk about how to stay informed, and then we'll open up for a Q&A. The VW Environmental Mitigation Trust is a nationwide program that provides funding for states to fully mitigate the excess NOx emissions caused by VW's use of illegal emissions testing defeat devices in certain VW diesel vehicles. The trust is a component of partial settlements with VW and is enumerated in the first partial consent decree as Appendix D, which identifies goals and 10 eligible mitigation actions and requirements. The California Air Resources Board, or CARB, is a designated lead agency acting on the state's behalf as beneficiary to implement California's allocation of VW trust funds. In 2018, CARB approved a beneficiary mitigation plan, which describes eligible project categories and program requirements. In California, the VW Environmental Mitigation Trust programs are being administered statewide in partnerships between CARB and 3 local air districts. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District is serving as the program administrator for the Light-Duty Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. There are several funding opportunities associated with the VW Mitigation Trust, including zero-emission freight and marine projects, which is now also open. The light-duty vehicle infrastructure category has $10 million in total for projects statewide, with $5 million for hydrogen stations and $5 million for electric vehicle charging stations. These funding amounts are set in the Beneficiary Mitigation Plan. We're talking today about the requirements for, that are specific to the solicitation for the light-duty zero-emission electric vehicle infrastructure program. The program goals are to direct at least 50% of funds to disadvantaged and low-income communities and expand EV charging access statewide and close geographic gaps in coverage. We are also trying to maximize the number of charging opportunities at the lowest cost. In other words, the VW funds requested per kilowatt. Here are some terms that we'll be using in this webinar and as part of the solicitation. I'll go through them here with you right now. The first is charging site. All of the chargers and associated equipment in one single location are a charging site. For example, if 10 level 2 chargers were located in a parking lot, they collectively would make up the charging site. In this photograph, you can see 4 chargers or charging stations in a parking lot. This collectively makes up the charging site. Next term is the applicant. This is the company or organization applying for this grant. They are responsible for putting together the application and associated supplementary materials, as well as being the primary contact with the air district. Once the applicant has been awarded funds, they'll be referred to as the contractor. We will discuss who is an eligible applicant in the next slide. The last term is project beneficiary. This is the host where charging stations will be located. We'll also be talking a little bit more about this in a minute. Some of you on this call may be potential applicants who, if awarded, will be contractors on this project. Some of you may be potential project beneficiaries. We'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute. Now, who is eligible to apply? These are the people who would do the work. Eligible applicants are companies or organizations, public or private, with a proven track record of overseeing the procurement, permitting, installation, and maintenance of at least 20 DC fast chargers and/or 100 level 2 chargers at 3 or more different property locations or for 3 or more different customers in California since January 1st, 2018. Examples of an eligible applicant include vendors, installers, and aggregators. Once awarded, these applicants are referred to as contractors for the purpose of this solicitation. For additional information on eligibility, please see the solicitation guidance. Now we'll talk about project beneficiaries. These are the organizations or companies who will benefit from the project. Project beneficiaries include any businesses, nonprofits, or public agencies who either own the property where the proposed chargers will be installed or who provide evidence from the property owner who will allow the selected contractor to install and operate chargers for the duration of the operational period. Project beneficiaries cannot apply directly to this program, but rather must work with an eligible applicant. If you're interested in being a project beneficiary, you can sign up to be connected to potential applicants on our website. We will be posting your information for potential applicants to reach out to you on the program website. Currently, there is a posting on our website right now with project beneficiaries, which we'll be adding to weekly. Here's an example of who would be an applicant and who would be a project beneficiary. All names of companies are made up in this example. A company, Tilden EV, has experience installing 40 DC fast and 200 level 2 chargers across California at 10 locations owned by 5 different property owners since 2018. This company, if it meets the additional eligibility criteria, is an eligible applicant. They reach out to several small businesses across the state, including one local market named the City Feed and Supply, that is interested in having chargers put into its parking lot. The parking lot is open to the public, and the chargers are accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. City Feed and Supply, if they meet all the eligibility criteria, is the project beneficiary. Tilden EV, as the applicant, gathers information from the project beneficiary, City Feed and Supply, for the application, including a letter of commitment. It is Tilden EV, as the applicant, who applies for this funding opportunity, not the market. Now let's look at another example based on a question that came in. If there is an apartment complex that wants to participate, can they only participate if they want 200 level 2 chargers? The answer is no, for several reasons. First, the apartment complex is not an eligible applicant. They are a project beneficiary. In this scenario, once again, Tilden EV is the applicant and reaches out to the apartment complex as one of its several potential project beneficiaries. Tilden EV, as the applicant, may in fact apply to install 200 level 2 chargers, but this would be at multiple apartment complexes. Those chargers would go into several locations. These are the eligible charging types. DC fast, level 2, and level 1 are all permittable charging types. However, there are some requirements for each in terms of kilowatts, connector type, and more. In addition, as you will see later, there are additional requirements in terms of number and type of facility they will be placed at. For full eligibility requirements, please refer to the solicitation. The VW administrator seeks to award up to $5 million in trust funds to approximately 2 to 10 applicants through this solicitation. The maximum award to a single applicant is $4 million, and the minimum award is anticipated to be $500,000. The maximum amount of funding can be applied for each charging site will vary depending on the ownership of the property where it will be located and on whether stations will be accessible to the general public. Maximum funding amounts for each proposed station may not exceed the following: up to 100% of eligible costs for publicly accessible charging stations at government-owned properties, up to 80% for publicly accessible charging stations at privately owned properties, and up to 60% for charging stations serving employees and visitors at workplaces, and multi-dwelling units serving both residents and guests. Note that this is a competitive solicitation, and requesting the maximums may make the site less competitive. Let's take a look at another question that has come in about maximum funding. Using our example from earlier with our project beneficiary, City Feed and Supply Market, and our applicant, Tilden EV. In our example, City Feed and Supply is a privately owned market. It has a parking lot that is available to the public 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even when the market is not open. Would it qualify as a workplace? People certainly do work there. Or is it a privately owned facility? If the chargers are only serving the employees, for example, in the employee parking lot, then it would only qualify for 60% funding as a workplace. But if the chargers are serving the public and be publicly available, then this would be privately owned and could qualify for 80% of eligible costs. Now we'll talk about matching and co-funding. For the purposes of this solicitation, we use the terms match funding and co-funding interchangeably. Funds that are not VW trust funds and that are applied toward eligible costs can be considered match or co-funding. In your budget, show all sources of funding broken up by line item and showing only eligible costs. Unallowable sources are match co-funding, unallowable sources are match or co-funding may not include other California Air Resources Board funding, including but not limited to the Clean Off-Road Equipment Voucher Incentive Program, Carl Moyer Program, AB 923, and AB 617. Also, match or co-funding may not include funding from SB 350, California Energy Commission, and Electrify America programs. Additionally, although contractors and project beneficiaries cannot use low carbon fuel standard credits as match or co-funding, they may earn credits by the chargers funded through this program. Because there are many rules about matching funds and co-funding, if you have specific questions about matching and co-funding, please send an email to the program's email address and we can address the answer in an FAQ available to everyone. Each application must include a proposal for the minimum number of each type of charger. 20 DC fast chargers at 5 or more locations, or 200 level 2 chargers at 20 or more locations, or 10 DC fast and 100 level 2 chargers at 5 or more locations. Applications that propose only level 1 chargers are not eligible. However, level 1 chargers may be included in proposals that meet the minimum proposal eligibility described above. Each location with level 1 chargers must include a minimum of 10 level 1 chargers and may only be installed at multi-dwelling units and airport long-term parking facilities. Next, we'll talk about application requirements. As part of this application, applicants will be asked to complete project lists. There is a template on our website that applicants should complete to submit their list. The first list is the priority list. Projects listed in the priority list must be shovel-ready. Applicants may submit a proposal that requests up to $2.5 million in trust funds. The VW administrator will be reviewing and evaluating all stations proposed in the priority list first. Applicants who propose less than $2.5 million should include all shovel-ready projects on this list. The next list is the backup list. Applicants who are proposing more than $2.5 million in shovel-ready projects may propose additional stations in the backup list. Applicants may request up to $2.5 million in funding for projects using the backup list. Stations listed in the backup list are distinguished from those on the priority list in that the applicant considers these stations to be a lower priority for this funding opportunity. Applicants who propose less than $2.5 million should not submit any shovel-ready projects on a backup list. The last list is the contingency list. Applicants may use the contingency list option for any of the following three conditions. The first condition is as follows. Applicants who want to propose more than $5 million in shovel-ready projects may submit their lowest priority projects on the contingency list as a way of applying for up to $7.5 million, i.e. an additional $2.5 million in projects shown on the contingency list plus $5 million for projects listed in priority and backup list. The VW administrator will review shovel-ready projects proposed on the contingency list only if the program is not oversubscribed and after having evaluated all shovel-ready projects listed on priority and backup lists. The second condition is as follows. Applicants who have projects that are not shovel-ready may use the contingency list to apply for projects totaling up to $2.5 million. In this case, the application may appear incomplete as certain required information may not be submitted at the time of application. In other words, the letter of support from a project beneficiary may not yet be available. The VW administrator will only review these projects after having completed review of all other shovel-ready projects on the priority and backup list. Last, applicants may also use the contingency list option to submit a brief proposal, 1,000 words max, that describes their approach for quickly identifying new projects in the event that a project that is selected for award is later withdrawn or canceled. This should include planned community outreach, including educational efforts to explain the proposed project to the public. There is a template for project lists on the VW Mitigation Trust website. Here we'll briefly walk you through an example of what to include. You can download the template from the VW Mitigation Trust website under the application checklist. Only submit one Excel spreadsheet per application. Everything you need should be in here. When you open the spreadsheet, the first tab has information about the applicant. This is very straightforward. Just fill it in. The second tab is for the priority list. Applicants can have up to $2.5 million worth of projects on this tab. They must be shovel-ready. Please list out each charging site in order of priority, with number 1 being the highest priority charging site. If a charging site has 2 types of chargers, for example, 20 level 2s and 5 DC fast, they should be separated into 2 lines. The charging sites with the same charger type will be compared and ranked against one another. The next tab is for the backup list. These are an additional $2.5 million worth of projects that are of lower priority than the priority list. These projects should also be shovel-ready. Applicants are not required to have a backup list, and if you do not plan on applying for more than $2.5 million, then do not use this list. Again, list the charging sites in order of priority from number 1 being the highest priority. The last tab is the contingency list. These projects do not need to be shovel-ready. If your plan is to give a brief proposal instead of an actual list of potential projects, you can submit that proposal as a separate PDF. You do not need to enter anything here. The solicitation will close on Thursday, July 15th at 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. We encourage applicants to get your application in early to ensure that you do not run into technical difficulties. There will not be extensions due to technical glitches, so please plan ahead. If you haven't already started an account for the application, we encourage you to do so later today or tomorrow to make sure you do not have any technical issues or questions. In order to apply, the applicant will need the following items: a project narrative, which includes your team qualifications, ability to meet deadlines, previous awards, and project readiness. Project list, a template of which is available on our website. Letters of commitment from project beneficiaries, an example of which is on our website. Template agreements between project beneficiaries and contractors. Project budget, including matching funds. The budget should show only eligible costs and be broken up by line item, quotes for EV chargers, and the applicant W-9. There is a video on the website with instructions on how to use the application system. You are encouraged to review it before you submit your application. Now we're going to discuss the evaluation criteria. This is a competitive solicitation. All applications will undergo an initial screening process for eligibility and completeness according to the criteria set forth in the solicitation guidance. Then, priority lists will be reviewed first. Within those, charging sites in or adjacent to it, disadvantaged and low-income communities will be reviewed and prioritized for funding. Charging sites will then be ranked based on the requested VW funds and the maximum charging capacity at each site, where a lower amount of funds requested coupled with a higher charging capacity will be ranked more highly. Charging sites with the same types of chargers will be ranked against one another. If the program is oversubscribed, after the review above, the VW administrator will prioritize charging sites located in counties with a higher need of charging infrastructure by 2025 compared to what is currently available. For additional details on evaluation, including any of that information I just gave, please see the solicitation guidance document. And if you have further questions, you're welcome to reach out to the program email address. Your questions will be answered in our Q&A posted online. Let's now quickly go over the tentative timeline for this program. The solicitation is now open, and it will close on July 15th. This is a competitive solicitation. Applications will not be looked at until the solicitation closes. Evaluation will happen shortly thereafter with a notice to proceed in September. Contracting will then happen at the end of 2021. Project implementation will follow starting in 2022 with a 3-year operations and annual reporting to follow that the contractor is responsible for. Copies of purchase orders must be submitted within 5 months of the notice to proceed. The notice to proceed is issued. Funded stations must be placed into service and be operational within 18 months of the date of the notice to proceed. Before you apply, make sure that this is a timeline that will work for both you and your project beneficiaries. Additional details with all the dates that I just outlined and deadlines can be found in the solicitation. Let's talk about project implementation requirements and operations to make sure that this is going to be a good program for you. After the contract between the VW administrator and the contractor has been issued, executed, and a notice to proceed has been issued, contractors may begin work, which includes working with the project beneficiaries to plan installations and purchase EV charging equipment. There are several requirements in the solicitation guidance, but here are a few key ones. Contractors must install physical directional signage for each identification of charging station location within the facility or parking area, and at the station to designate the parking spaces as for EV charging use only. Contractors must post information about the charging stations on the U.S. Department of Energy Alternative Fuel Data Center website. The website link is in the solicitation. Contractors must ensure that all trust-funded work complies with all California prevailing wage requirements, including but not limited to provisions of State Labor Code, Section 1771. Contractors are responsible for securing all permits and ensuring all project equipment is installed to the manufacturer's specification. All electrical work must be in accordance with local codes, permitting, inspection requirements, or any American with Disabilities Act requirements, if applicable. Contractors must agree to allow the VW administrator or its designee to inspect the installation premises of the charging stations after the receipt of an application and for up to 36 months after the issuance of the reimbursement payment. Contractors must provide all administrative support for the project during both implementation and operational periods, secure permits, and address other issues that may arise. Now we're going to talk about project operational requirements. After After the equipment has been placed into service, the contractor will operate the equipment in California as required in the solicitation guidance. So again, make sure that this is a good fit for you and your project beneficiaries. We'll be reviewing some of the key requirements here, but please see the solicitation guidance for details on this and additional requirements. The contractor must maintain and operate all funded equipment in service for a minimum of 3 years. Charging stations must be available for use at least 250 days per year and for at least 8 hours per day during normal business hours. The contractor shall ensure that insurance as required by law is maintained for the property and for the trust-funded equipment, including but not limited to property liability and workers' compensation insurance. If the contractor would like to assign, sell, license, or otherwise transfer any rights or obligations to a third party during the term of the funding agreement, the contractor must seek written approval from the VW administrator, which is us at the Air District. The new purchaser will be required to fulfill all the remaining requirements in the funding agreement made with the original contractor. There are several requirements associated with this, so please see the solicitation guidance. For details on those requirements and additional requirements as well, you can please take a look at the solicitation guidance, or you can send us an email. To stay up to date and receive alerts about this program, please fill out the SurveyMonkey form listed here. You can also review relevant information associated with the program on our website or reach out via email with questions. They will be answered in a Q&A posted to the program website. There will be a copy of the slides from today's presentation, as well as a recording of this presentation posted on the website. I'll pause here for a moment so everyone has a chance to jot this information down. Now we're going to open up the webinar for questions. As I mentioned at the start of the webinar, we'll be answering questions that come in through the chat first. And then if you haven't already entered your questions, please feel free to do so now. Similar questions will be coupled together. Once we have answered a few questions, we will answer questions from people that want to ask them verbally. If you would like to wait and ask your question in this manner, you can use the raise your hand feature. The host will then call on you, and you can unmute yourself to ask your question or share your comments and feedback. Please do not unmute yourself until you've been called on. And then please be sure to mute yourself again once you're done with your question. And limit your question to 2 minutes if you can. If you're on the phone, and once you're called on, you can unmute yourself using *6 and mute yourself again using *6 again. And to raise your hand, just hit *9. Please keep in mind that if you have been forwarded this invite from a colleague, your name will show up as that of your colleague. So you may be called by your colleague's name. Please identify yourself and your company or organization before you ask a question. Please also keep in mind there are quite a few people in this webinar. So if you can keep your questions short, or if they've already been answered, we would appreciate you moving on. You can also ask questions by emailing us at californiavwtrust@bachmed.com, and we'll be releasing Q&As with questions regularly. Some of you may have already submitted questions to this email address, and they will be included in the Q&A. The first Q&A was posted on Monday. We plan to have updates each week. So if you submitted a question, it's not yet posted on Monday, it will be in an updated version in the coming weeks. You do not need to ask a question again here. Of course, you're welcome to, but we encourage you to use this time for new questions. We're going to take a moment now to answer questions that came in through email, and then we'll move to the questions that came in through chat and then phone. So here are some of the questions that have come in through email. The first one is, will the vendors own the infrastructure? And we talked a little bit about this in the webinar, but we'll address it here as well. The contractor can either own the charging equipment or pass ownership to the project beneficiary. If the contractor chooses to pass ownership of the charging equipment to the project beneficiary, the contractor is still responsible for implementation, operation, and maintenance, and data reporting of the station for the contract term. Any agreements regarding change of ownership between the contractor and the project beneficiary must be approved in advance by the VW administrator, which in this case is the Air District. The next question is, in the VW Trust Solicitation Guidance, it says contractors must designate parking spaces for EV charging use only. Can you explain why this is necessary, and is this a requirement? So one of the goals of this solicitation is to maximize charging opportunities. This requirement is meant to prevent a situation where an EV driver needs to charge but is unable because a non-EV car is parked in that location. Next question is, the guidelines mention geographic gaps. Where are these identified? So charging sites must fill geographic gaps not met by SB 350 Electrify America and California Energy Commission programs. Proposed stations that are already funded or will be funded by these programs are ineligible, and proposed stations that are located at the same general site as stations funded by these programs are also not eligible. Applicants must discuss how they meet this eligibility requirement in their narrative. Additionally, if the program is oversubscribed, after initial review as laid out in the solicitation, the VW administrator will prioritize charging sites located in counties with a higher need of charging infrastructure by 2025 compared to what is currently available. So details on all of this are available in the solicitation guidance. Next question, is there a funding or station limit per beneficiary? How do the beneficiaries know how many stations to request? So there's no limit per project beneficiary. Entities interested in becoming project beneficiaries will need to sign up on the online form, and then potential applicants may reach out and work with the project beneficiaries to determine and finalize the scope based on the charging demand, energy capacity, costs, and so on. Next question is, who is responsible for CEQA, the vendor or the project beneficiary? So the contractor is responsible for CEQA, among other implementation tasks, but the project beneficiary may need to work with the contractor to ensure compliance. Next question is, are there options for the project beneficiary to operate and maintain the stations? Who gets the fees generated by the station? This can be negotiated between the contractor and the project beneficiary. If the contractor chooses to pass operation and maintenance of the charging equipment to the project beneficiary, the contractor is still responsible for operation and maintenance and implementation and data reporting. If a vendor's application doesn't pass the initial screening, will that eliminate the project beneficiary in their application? And who prioritizes the project beneficiaries in the list? What is the content requirement of letters of commitment from project beneficiaries? All really good questions. So I'll go through each of them together. All applications will undergo an initial screening process for eligibility and completeness according to the criteria set forth in the solicitation. If the applicant does not pass the initial screening, then the entire application, including the project beneficiaries, will be rejected. It is the applicant who prioritizes the project beneficiaries on the list. There is a sample letter of commitment for project beneficiaries on the website. Basically, we want to ensure that project beneficiaries know what they have committed to and understand the requirements laid out in the solicitation. Another question that we got a couple of these. So are schools and universities eligible to apply as government or municipal owned facilities? So school districts and public universities are considered government owned properties, but private schools or private university properties are not. What if the project is larger than $4 million? Can we apply to cover part of the project? Applicants may apply for up to $7.5 million in trust funds by submitting one or more lists. The Air District will cap the award to any one applicant at $4 million. You can apply to cover part of the cost. Well, cost sharing, a higher percentage award is a higher ranking. So charging sites will be ranked based on the requested VW funds and the maximum charging capacity at each site. This is outlined in the solicitation. where a lower amount of funds requested coupled with a higher charging capacity will be ranked more highly. Are utility incentives considered a part of cost sharing? Yes, all funds that are not VW Trust funds are considered as a match. In your budget, show all sources of funding broken down by line item and showing only eligible costs. Another question, does VW keep LCFS credits for 3 years or for the operational life of the chargers? The answer is VW does not keep any low carbon fuel standards, so LCFS credits, generated by the funded charging stations, and contractors or project beneficiaries may claim all the credits generated by the charging stations funded through this program. Now we're going to move over to questions that came in through the chat. I'm going to hand this off to my colleague, Ken, who is going to read through them. And then I will be calling on people to answer questions who raise their hand.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Ken here. So we got quite a few questions through chat. We'll be going through a set of them. And if we don't get to your question in this set, do be aware that we got your question and we're working to get to everyone's question as we go through. All right, so first question is, when awarded, is an applicant able to change their DCFC equipment brand from one that they originally applied under? And the answer to that is yes, you're able to change brands post-award, so as long as the power output of the new equipment is the same or higher. Next question, and we got a couple questions asking about hydrogen stations, and I want to clarify that this solicitation that's being presented here today is for EV charging stations. The VW funds for hydrogen stations were awarded in a separate solicitation in partnership with CEC last year, and so that those stations are not part of this solicitation. Next question is, could you please clarify about a 2-week delay in processing for project beneficiary list on the website? And I want to point out that we are updating this project beneficiary list at least on a weekly basis. So please check on the website for updates on that. Next question is, should the publicly accessible sites be open 24 hours a day? And charging stations here, when you apply to charging stations must be available for use at least 250 days per year and at least 8 hours per day during the normal business hours. Right, so next question is on project beneficiary eligibility. Do the chargers need to be used for employees' personal vehicles in order to qualify as a quote-unquote workplace? Or are chargers used for EV fleet vehicles for a public agency that's not open to the public, eligible as part of a project beneficiary?
Yeah, so the response to that question is that workplace chargers can be for fleets, they can also be for employees, and they can also be for visitors. Chargers for public agencies' EV fleet are eligible as long as they meet all other requirements, and public agencies may sign up as a project beneficiary.
Thank you, Linda. Next question we have is, who would receive LCFS credits, the applicant or the beneficiary? And we got a few more questions regarding how FC credits work with this program. So the answer is that the applicant or the contractor and the project beneficiary will need to work together and determine who gets to claim LCFS credits. So as Minda also mentioned, the program does not really look at LCFS credits in those terms here and makes any requirements on who gets those credits. That's up to the applicant and the beneficiaries to work out. Next question is, can you please define what shovel ready means? And shovel ready means that the site is at least at the stage where construction can begin. So any pre-work necessary to get to that stage has already been done. Next question is regarding Cal EVIP and not being eligible for co-funding. and also about the requirement that specifies that the funding must go to fill geographical gaps not met by SB 350. Does that mean that any county that had or will have EVIP, CAL EVIP funding will be excluded? And the answer is, oh, go ahead, Linda.
So the response is no. Proposed stations that are already funded by the CEC, such as the CAL EVIP program or SB 350 or Electrify America programs are ineligible, and proposed stations that are located at the same general site as stations funded by these programs are also ineligible. And we encourage that the applicants discuss how they meet this requirement in the narrative.
Thank you, Linda. Next question we have is, can matching funds come from investor-owned utility programs such as SCE's Charge Ready program?
Yeah, so as Minna mentioned before, we do encourage co-funding or match funding, and we use that term interchangeably. And so in your budget, you should show all your sources of funding broken up by line item and showing only eligible costs. So as Minna mentioned earlier, charging sites must fulfill geographic gaps not met by SB 350, Electrify America, and the California Energy Commission programs. The Southern California Edison's Charge Ready Transport program is a program approved by the CPUC under SB 350. And for that reason, it would not meet this criteria. So you cannot use the Southern California Edison's Charge Ready program as match funding.
Right, thank you, Linda. Next question is, if selected as a beneficiary, will the program cover 100% of the installation costs? And for publicly accessible stations that are installed at government-owned facilities, the program can cover up to 100% of the equipment and installation costs. For other types of facilities, there's a lower percentage that the program can cover. And Minna, I'm not if you could go to that slide with that table, that might be helpful. But also keep in mind that this solicitation is a competitive solicitation. So you'll be ranked against other projects based on how much you request, how much grant funds you request per kilowatt hour delivered or per kilowatt delivered. And the less you request per kilowatt capacity of the charging sites, the more likely you'll get funded. So we have quite a few more questions in the chat, but I think at this time, I'm going to look to Minda to see if we have any hand raisers that want to ask their questions live.
Sure, thank you. Thanks so much, Ken and Linda. I really appreciate it. Just before I move on, I want to make sure that this was the slide you were looking for me to pull up.
Yes, this is correct.
So if folks want to go ahead and raise their hand, if they want to ask questions verbally, we can do so. I'm actually not seeing anybody raising their hand, so I just want to confirm with Itzel that that's the case, and then we could go on to the chat.
Yeah, I think we can move on to the chat. Oh, sorry, we just got a couple of hand raises.
Oh, very good. Okay, well, let's grab the couple of hand raisers. I see James Wagner and Kent Bullard, and then we can go back to the questions listed in the chat. So James, you're up first. You can unmute yourself, and if you don't mind stating your name and where you're from.
My name is James Wagner. I work at UC Santa Barbara, and it wasn't clear to me. I signed up for a VW Mitigation account, but it wasn't clear to me how do I become a beneficiary there. I was kind of poking around and didn't find that option.
Oh, great question. Yeah, so on our website, there's actually a section for project beneficiaries, so don't sign up for the application. And there's a section that states project beneficiaries, and under there's a sign up link. I'm realizing I see a couple chats came into with people having trouble finding that link. So I think after this webinar, what we'll do is we'll turn it into a little bit of a larger bubble or button so people can more easily identify it. It's just a quick survey to fill out, and then we post it for applicants to be able to reach out to you.
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Kent, and then I see Michael Tereri as well. So Kent, go ahead and unmute yourself, introduce yourself, unmute yourself, state your name and where you're from.
This is Kent Bullard. I'm from Ventura, California. I'm just an EV advocate interested in the beneficiary aspects of things. If there's an existing facility that it was an old paddle unit from the previous era of electric vehicles. So the meter, the disconnects, the underground conduit, all the way to the pedestals are still in existence. All it's going to take is mounting new chargers on those pedestals. They were level 2 40 amp units, magnet chargers before. Can that existing infrastructure count as matching funds?
Well, it's an interesting question, Linda.
Because it would not have to duplicate all that equipment that's already been paid for.
Yeah, Linda, is this something that you feel like you can answer?
Oh, so one of the questions I have is the equipment's already there, but did you have funds already been spent?
20 years ago, the chargers were put in in the EV1 days, and then during the age of darkness, those chargers are removed, and we're looking to replace them. So the infrastructure is there. We just need the chargers. And would the infrastructure that was paid for in the past qualify as our matching portion of the project?
Yeah, I was saying no, because in order for it to be considered as matching funds, it needs to be expended within the contract time frame.
Okay. Thanks, Linda, for helping with that one. Okay, one more question from a hand raiser, and then we'll go back to the questions that have come in through chat. So, Michael Tereri, if you could please state your name and where you're from.
Good afternoon. Well, you already stated my name. You got the pronunciation perfect.
Okay.
So thank you for that. You got all the vowels in there. I just wanted to clarify, if a property owner has used an SB 350 program at a site, that site is then not eligible. However, if that city or whoever has another project location some distance away, more than walking distance, whatever that reasonable standard is, and has not utilized an SB 350 program at that site, can you confirm that second site would be eligible?
Sounds like another funding question that I'm wondering, Linda, if you could advise on.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think that charging station would likely be eligible. We just need to make sure it meets all other requirements, and you would need to explain in the application how your project is filling the gap. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, great. Well, thanks for those questions. Ken and Linda, are you able to go back to the chat and answer some more of those?
Yeah, thank you. We can take a few more from the chat. I do want to keep an eye on the time. We have 10 minutes here, so we probably will not get to every question in the chat. There's quite a few. But if we do not get to your question, be aware that we do have it, and we will post the answer on the Q&A document that will be updated. All right. So going back to the chat, we have one question come in. Will public EVSE and DCFC have to comply with DMS and CARB regulations? And also related to this, will installers be required to have appropriate EVITP certifications? I think this is something that we're going to have to do a little bit of research on. So look for the answer in this in the Q&A document. Next question. Some sites, such as federal facilities, are not under the jurisdiction of any building departments, and what inspections are required? We really encourage you to check with your local jurisdictions on what inspections are required. As part of this program, however, the funding equipment may be inspected by the Air District or by a third-party designee of the Air District. Next question, are projects ranked on the number of chargers, and is there a minimum number of chargers that need to be installed at a site? So the answer is that projects are ranked on the dollars that are being requested for the power output at a site. And the power output will be measured in terms of kilowatts that can be delivered by sustained kilowatts that can be delivered by the chargers operating at capacity at that site. And there is a minimum number of chargers that need to be included in the application, and there are 3 thresholds for that, and that's listed in the guidance. I believe there may also be a slide here in the webinar. Minda, if you want to see if you have that slide up. Next question is, do permits need to be acquired in order to be considered shovel ready? And the answer is no. Permits can be obtained after contract execution.
Sorry, Ken, you dropped out for me for 1 minute. Can you just let me know which slide it was you wanted me to pull up?
It's a few slides after the one you're showing right now. The one before it, yeah.
Oh, this one. Okay, sorry about that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wait. The one before this. Sorry. After. No. After.
It's the one that requires like 200.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry. Modern technology dropped, so I missed which one you asked for. So, okay, please go ahead. Go on.
All right. Next question is, can a project beneficiary be part of more than one applicant's application? The answer is yes. A project beneficiary can be part of more than one applicant's application. All right, we got quite a few questions regarding the stacking of funds and co-funding sources. In the interest of not going over each individual source, we're gonna collect all of that and put it into the question and answers document that we'll be posting onto the website relatively soon. Another question we got is about the payment process, whether there's advance payment or if it's by reimbursement, and if by reimbursement, when will the reimbursement come? We got a couple questions on this, and the answer is that payments for this program will be on a reimbursement basis, and the reimbursement will come after the stations have been installed and are up and operating. And with that, we have 5 minutes left. And so Minda, I'm going to check with you, see if we have any other hand raisers that we may want to get to here.
Sure. That sounds good. Why don't we see if there's a couple more hand raisers who have any questions? And then Ken, are there more chat questions that you were looking to answer?
There's a few more chat questions coming in right now that we can get to afterwards, but I'll get the hand raisers first, and we can put the chat questions in the Q&A document.
Yeah, okay, that sounds great. So I'll go ahead and I'll call on Levi Tilleman. Please introduce yourself and where you're from, and you're welcome to unmute yourself now. I want to make sure I pronounced your name. It could be Levi, L-E-V-I, Tilleman, if you want to. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Yep. Hi, sorry, I wasn't able to unmute myself until now. Yeah, this is Levi Tilleman with Ample. And I have a question about the fact that you guys are using peak kilowatts capacity to prioritize systems rather than kilowatt hours delivered. What is the goal there, seeing as the thing that really addresses climate change is the number of kilowatt hours that are actually delivered through a system, and peak kilowatt capacity actually can have a destabilizing effect on the grid and the overall electricity system?
Oh, interesting question from Levi. Ken, is this something that you feel like you could take on?
Sure, I can provide some insights on when you're talking about the kilowatts delivered. That is really in the ranking process for applications here. So I can provide some insight and some background on that piece of it. So when we looked at ways we rank projects, we wanted to come up with a ranking system that could work for the multiple different types of chargers out there, be it level 1, level 2 DC fast chargers. And in terms of looking across the different chargers, we realized we couldn't do like a dollar amount per plug provided, because how do you compare one DC plug to a number of level 2 plugs? But what we could do is we could compare it against how much power can be delivered by these plugs, so that it allows us to compare across different types of chargers there. Now, in terms of ranking applications, we looked at also kilowatt hours, but we realized that that is going to be a really hard metric to get a sense of before you have chargers in the ground and delivering electricity to cars too. So it's hard to gauge like how much kilowatt hours will be delivered by a site, because it's dependent on how many vehicles would go to that site to charge. So we couldn't see that system really working in terms of ranking. So because of all of that, what we settled on was a ranking system that looks at kilowatts delivered as a way to really measure across projects and to provide a way to rank different projects against each other.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
I think that was a good answer. Thank you, Ken. Yeah, definitely a good, a thoughtful challenge that we had. Just in the interest of time, I want to make sure we get to the other folks. So I see Michael and James have both raised their hands. Since we're so short on time, if you could keep your questions really brief, we would appreciate it. Go ahead, Michael. You can unmute yourself. Okay, I'm not sure. Okay.
We did it. Perfect. I'm muted now.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. Would like a sanity check in terms of reimbursement. Can a contractor invoice the program for the costs of the project and then put the value of the funding as a line item discount on their invoice? Or does the beneficiary have to pay the full cost of the project upfront and then being reimbursed? It really comes to who's carrying the cost. Can it be the contractor, or does it have to be the beneficiary?
I think that the intention was that the contractor would, but Linda, can you add a little color to what I'm stating in terms of who's responsible for the initial cost?
I'll pass this one on to Ken.
I can, I guess I can provide some brief insight into this. So in terms of the program will reimburse costs when the station's installed and operating. And it's really blind to who bears the responsibility for carrying that cost between the applicant and the beneficiary. So really, it could be up to you, the applicant or the beneficiary, to work out a plan on how to carry that cost. It could be all on the applicant or on the beneficiary, or some way of dividing it up. But the key point is the program will not reimburse for costs until the stations are installed and up and operating.
Thank you. Okay, and the last question, right at 3 o'clock, James, you squeaking in right under the wire. Go ahead.
Sure, I'm curious. So it's James from UC Santa Barbara one more time. I'm curious about ranking. Like we have some make-ready stubs in place, and we could buy chargers that cost $7,000 or chargers that cost $500. Like if depending how much networking and smarts are in the thing, if we bought a $500 charger and we already had the wiring in place, would that put us higher up in the ranking because it's a better return on investment in terms of delivering power to parking at a low rate?
Yeah, good question about what, well, Linda, do you want to just talk a little bit about, I'm trying to think of the best way to rephrase this, kind of what the expectations are in terms of what needs to be included. I guess that's what you're kind of getting at, is what the expectations are in terms of what needs to be included and how that would fit in. Do you want to go ahead, Linda?
Yeah, so the first thing I would consider is going through the equipment requirements, because there are requirements as to whether the chargers are network, what is required, and then everything else is extra. So we, as Ken mentioned earlier, we are evaluating or ranking based on VW funds requested per kilowatt. So if you're requesting relatively lesser funds, then it is likely that that charger will score higher, or not charger, the charging stations will score higher.
Right. So thanks, Linda. So I just wanted to thank everybody for coming, and thank you to my colleagues Linda Huey and Ken Mack and Isabel Guzman for assisting. If you ask a question in the chat, we will add it to our Q&A so that everyone is available to everybody. And if you have a colleague who is not able to attend today, please refer them to our website. We'll be posting this video. And also, if you have additional questions you feel like that weren't answered or you think of afterwards, please just send an email to californiavwtrust@bachmed.gov, and it'll be added to the Q&A and posted to our website. Our goal is to update the Q&A on a weekly basis, and if you don't see your question there, as long as you've gotten a response from the email, we have it, and we're looking into it, and we will post it as soon as we can. So thank you again, everyone, for attending. And we look forward to seeing some really great applications.